Ever wonder what happens to all the leftover stuff after they make our favorite foods?
Interesting.
And not like the scraps we leave on our plates. I'm talking about the leftovers on a huge scale, especially all the liquids involved.
Okay.
Seems like a messy problem. Turns out it might be a really valuable opportunity.
Okay, yeah.
And that's where this company, GreenFlow Environmental Solutions, comes in.
Right.
They're all about making this liquid waste useful sustainably. So let's dive in. How do they do it? And what does it mean for, well, a greener planet
Yeah.
and maybe even greener, profits?
Yeah,
Now, I've heard about recycling, obviously,
of course, yeah.
but liquid waste recycling,
Mhm.
that's a new one.
Yeah.
What exactly is liquid organic waste? And what makes it so challenging?
It's interesting, right? We don't often think about like what happens after, the supermarket shelf, but
Right.
behind every bottle of juice, every yogurt cup, there's a whole lot of water
Mm.
and organic byproducts left over from making the food.
Okay.
GreenFlow's materials really highlight how big this really is.
Yeah.
Think about just washing fruits and veggies.
Right.
The way left over from cheese making,
Hmm.
or even what's left after brewing beer.
Yeah, yeah.
It all adds up. And unlike the recycling we're used to dealing with these liquids, often full of organic matter,
Mm.
you need to handle it in a specialized way.
I can only imagine. It's not like you can just toss this in a bin.
Right, exactly.
So how does GreenFlow approach this whole liquid waste challenge? What do they do differently?
Well, the GreenFlow recognizes that there's no one solution that fits every case.
Okay.
Every food production process is different,
Makes sense.
which means the waste it makes is also different.
Yeah.
So they work with each company really closely to develop a custom plan, taking into account their specific needs
Okay.
and the waste types they generate.
Got it.
That's what's, I think, so fascinating. It's very tailored.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. But let's be honest, a lot of companies are probably more concerned with just, the rules and regulations than they are about saving the planet. How does GreenFlow address that very real concern?
It's true, yeah. Compliance can be a real pain.
Yeah.
But this is where GreenFlow really shines. They've built their entire process around making sure companies follow the rules.
Yep.
From the start, when they assess the waste, to the final disposal, they handle everything.
Wow.
They even provide all the documentation so businesses can prove they're meeting environmental standards.
Okay.
Takes a load off their plate, while also, being environmentally responsible.
So it's compliance and peace of mind. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm really curious about this whole, you keep saying it, liquid recycling. What does GreenFlow actually do with this waste?
So instead of seeing this waste as a bad thing, they figured out ways to turn it into, a resource.
Okay.
One really good example is how they take dairy waste, which the dairy industry makes a ton of, and they use a process called, get this, anaerobic digestion to make it into fertilizer.
Hold on, break that down for me. Anaerobic digestion.
Yeah, anaerobic digestion.
That sounds pretty complicated.
It's pretty ingenious, actually.
Okay.
So they use these microorganisms, kind of like little waste-eating helpers,
Okay.
in an environment without oxygen to break down the organic material.
Okay.
This process creates biogas, which can be used as renewable energy.
Wow.
And what's left after that is a fertilizer that's packed with nutrients.
So they're not just managing waste, they're creating renewable energy and valuable byproducts. That's amazing.
Exactly, that's the idea.
It's like what's that term? A circular economy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
you got it.
Yeah.
The circular economy, to put it simply, is about using resources for as long as possible,
Okay.
getting the most out of them, and then returning them to the system instead of just throwing them away.
Okay. Yeah.
And by doing that, you minimize waste, you reduce the need for new materials,
Right.
and ultimately, we lower our impact on the environment.
Yeah.
And what's even better, this whole approach can actually be a good thing for businesses.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, okay. How so?
it can lower their disposal costs
Makes sense.
and even create new ways for them to make money. It's a win-win.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I'm sold on the idea, but how does this actually work in real life?
Sure.
What are the steps GreenFlow takes?
Yeah, so they actually have a very clear process on their website.
Okay.
It all starts with a very thorough assessment to really understand the waste the business has.
So it's about getting a clear picture first.
Exactly. You need to know what you're dealing with before you can find a solution.
Yeah,
Right?
that makes sense. And then what? After the assessment?
Well, based on what they find, GreenFlow will create a custom disposal plan. This plan maps out the most efficient and eco-friendly ways to deal with their specific waste.
So far, so good. So what's next?
And that's where they actually put the plan into action. They use those advanced and environmentally friendly processing methods we talked about. This could be anything from anaerobic digestion to composting. It really just depends.
And all of this is done with full transparency and documentation, right? I mean, they're keeping records of everything.
Precisely. They provide detailed documentation every step of the way, ensuring that businesses are meeting all the necessary regulations. They even have a dedicated team to handle all the compliance reporting, which is a huge relief for a lot of companies.
That's impressive, but it almost sounds too good to be true. Are there any downsides to all of this?
Well, of course, like with anything new, there can be, some bumps in the road. Like setting all this up often means spending money up front on new technologies, or even just like building the infrastructure.
Yeah, I could see that.
And like any specialized field, you need skilled workers who actually know how to use these technologies and processes.
Right. Shifting a whole system, it's never easy or cheap, but I guess like the long-term benefits could outweigh those initial costs, maybe?
Exactly. That's what GreenFlow's, hoping for. And so far, it seems like it's working out for their clients. Actually, they have a bunch of case studies on their site that show how much money and time their clients have saved. One dairy company was even able to cut their disposal costs by, get this, 30% after working with GreenFlow.
Wow, 30%, that's huge. It sounds like they're really onto something. But for our listeners, I think the big question is, okay, how does this affect them? We're talking about like industrial food production, but what about everyday people?
You're right. It's important to, connect the dots. Think about it this way. Every time you buy food, you're kind of supporting this whole chain of production behind it.
Yeah, okay.
And the more people want sustainably made products, the more companies will have to, adopt practices like
Yeah.
what GreenFlow's doing.
It's like a chicken and egg thing almost. Businesses need to see the demand, but people need better options first.
Exactly. And that's a big part of why GreenFlow doesn't just work with businesses. They're really trying to teach people about why sustainable waste management is so important. They've even partnered with food bloggers and influencers to get the word out, like where our food comes from and what happens after we eat it.
I like that. It's great to see a company that actually cares about educating people, being transparent.
Right.
Speaking of transparencies, there's one more thing I got to ask about. I was on their site and I saw they have a partnership with One Tree Planted.
Oh, yeah.
What's that about?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually one of my favorite things about them. For every service they provide, they plant a tree.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And they do this with One Tree Planted, a nonprofit focused on planting trees around the world.
That's so cool.
It's a really awesome way for them to, balance out their environmental impact even more.
It really shows how sustainability can be about more than just doing less harm. It can actually, have a positive impact. It's things like this that really tell you a company is serious.
Totally. And it just shows how everything's connected,
Right.
The choices we make about what we buy, which companies we support, it all has an impact, even in ways we might not realize.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've covered a lot about GreenFlow today, from their unique approach to their commitment to actually being sustainable. But before we move on, I kind of want to zoom out a bit. Are there other cool developments or solutions in this whole liquid organic waste management world that you've found in your research?
Oh, absolutely. There's actually some super cool innovation happening right now in this field.
Like what?
Well, there's this one company that's using, get this, black soldier fly larvae to, process food waste.
Okay, hold on. How does that work?
So the larvae actually eat the waste, and then they can be harvested and used as a sustainable protein source for animal feed.
Wow, that's wild. Using nature to solve our waste problems. I love it.
Right. And then there are companies looking into how algae can actually treat wastewater.
Really?
Yeah, algae can absorb the nutrients and pollutants from the water, so it cleans the water and creates biomass that can be used for things like biofuel or fertilizer.
It sounds like the future of waste management is, well, pretty green.
It really does. And it's not always about these super high-tech solutions either. Sometimes the simplest ideas work just as well.
Right.
For example, some companies are starting to use these closed-loop water systems, so they treat and reuse the same water multiple times, which drastically cuts down on their water use and wastewater.
That's fascinating. So it's this mix of innovation, new technology, and just being willing to try new things.
Exactly. It's about questioning how we've always done things and being open to new possibilities.
It all comes back to perspective, right? Seeing waste not as garbage, but as something valuable we can use.
You got it. It's about moving away from that old take, make, waste model and towards something that's more circular, more regenerative.
This is obviously a big issue with a lot going on, but for our listeners who might be a little overwhelmed, like, what can they even do to make a difference?
That's such a good question. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, for sure. But every little thing helps. Honestly, just start by thinking about your own habits, like how much food you waste at home. Try to support businesses that are trying to be more sustainable. And don't be afraid to tell your elected officials that you care about these issues.
Those are all great points. And I think it's important to remember, like, we're not in this alone. There are tons of people, organizations, businesses out there all working towards the same goal, a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. Get involved, join those communities, make your voice heard.
Speaking of moving forward, what are some of the biggest challenges we need to overcome to make this whole circular economy thing, like, the norm? What do you think, based on your deep dive?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Honestly, I think a lot of it is just awareness. Many people still don't get how big the waste problem is or how much potential these new solutions have.
So education is key.
For sure. We had to do a better job of explaining the benefits of sustainable waste management, and not just to businesses and politicians. We need to reach everyone.
Because ultimately, we have to change how people think, right? We need to move from this throwaway culture to something more sustainable.
Yes, exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our planet and realizing that the choices we make now will affect the world we leave behind for, our kids and grandkids.
Yeah, it's a huge task for sure, but it sounds like there's, light at the end of the tunnel for all this sustainable waste stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just about, like, fixing what we've messed up. It's about creating something new and better.
Okay.
Think about all the new jobs that could be created with these green industries taking off.
That's a good point. A more sustainable future isn't just, like, good for the planet. It could be good for the economy, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about the impact on people either.
Right.
By supporting these sustainable practices, we can help make a more just and healthy world for everyone.
It really seems like things are changing. Like, we're about to see a whole new way of thinking about waste.
I think so, too.
Right.
And, for anyone who wants to learn more or even get involved, I always recommend checking out GreenFlow's website.
Okay.
They've got a ton of information there. Like, you can really dive deep into how their processes work, and they have those inspiring stories about businesses already making a difference.
I'm sure our listeners will want to check that out. But before we go, I always like to end our deep dives with, like, a final thought, something for people to think about afterward. So for our listeners who are already thinking about making changes in their own lives, what's one small step they can take right now to, I don't know, reduce their own liquid footprint, if that makes sense?
That's a really good question. I'd say start by really paying attention to the brands you buy.
Okay.
Think about whether those companies actually care about sustainability. Are they transparent about what they do? Even those little choices can add up.
Yeah. And don't be shy about reaching out to companies and letting them know that sustainability matters to you. Because when customers speak, businesses listen.
That's so true.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up our deep dive for today. It's been really cool to explore this whole world of sustainable liquid waste management. Hopefully everyone learned something new.
It was great being here.
Huge thanks to GreenFlow Environmental Solutions for, well, inspiring us with their approach to tackling this important issue. And to our listeners, keep those questions coming, keep digging deeper, and remember, even small actions can lead to big changes. We'll see you next time.